Welcome everyone. I'll just give it a few seconds for everyone to join. I see people joining now. Attendee numbers are going up as we speak. Fantastic. Let's just give everyone a second to kind of make sure you can hear us and see all these lovely faces that we have here today. Thanks very much for joining, and welcome to the latest edition of Installer Festival, all running virtually and online. With a wonderful panel here today where we're going to host a conversation on the future of heat. So we're in partnership with Honeywell Home Products, and we're going to look at how the future requirements of the domestic heating system are forecast to be a lot different in the future. And so we're going to focus on that carbon-friendly house and how that will affect what the installer really needs to do. So we're going to look at the mega trends that are driving the change, take a regulatory viewpoint as well. We'll look at the technology innovations and the new products that are coming out, and discuss a bit about that knowledge skills gap and how we actually kind of move the whole industry forward. So let me say a warm welcome to our panelists. We have Robert Whitney from Resideo, who is responsible for looking at all those products in the short and medium term and what's coming next. We have Colin Timmins from BEAMA, who looks after the heating and controls group, focus on the heating and the regulation side. We have Joe Alsop, who is a chartered surveyor, ex-heating company owner, founder of the Heating Hub website, so looking at the consumer point of view. And then Steve Calvert, who is representing the installer side and the installer point of view. So hopefully we'll cover kind of a very broad, different perspectives and get into a bit of debate. Couple of things we'd love you guys to ask our panelists some questions. So there is a Q&A function and a chat function. So please type away as questions come up, and we will save time for you at the end. We might even call on you guys to actually ask your questions directly to the panelists. We can actually build some connection as we would in a real life event. But first, we've got a few questions that the panelists are going to kind of share some opinions with you and hopefully give you some food for thought. And Robert, you actually had you pulled together a really nice infographic just to kind of introduce a few of those, how some of the different perspectives kind of come together. Perhaps you could introduce that, which you should be able to see on your screen.
Yeah, this has come up.
We'll get
Hopefully everyone can see it. So yeah, I mean, what this is trying to show, guys, is there's no silver bullet to this problem, to solving this issue. And we've got electrification agenda, and obviously there's all the stuff that's coming in around that with your heat pumps, lots of talk around that, and EVs as well, part of that solution. But one of the big things, obviously, that's been on the agenda for many years is demand reduction and energy efficiency. This is obviously still got to be a big part of it. Obviously, the less you use, the less energy you use, the better. There's also a lot of work going on around biofuels and decarbonising the existing fuels that we've got. So both making the natural gas blended with things like hydrogen and also biogas from agriculture. And then obviously there's the big agenda of decarbonisation and net zero. And obviously the UK government has set this target for 2050, where we'll be carbon neutral. And there's a whole frame of changes that's going to be needed to all aspects of society and all aspects of our life to achieve these carbon budgets that have been set by the Committee on Climate Change. So really, there's no single silver bullet solution to any of this. It's all interrelated. And that's what's making it difficult for government to crack this problem. And we need everyone on board to help us get there.
And you talk about those goals, Rob. How realistic is it to get to net zero and all that decarbonisation? It's going to mean scrapping millions of gas boilers. What's your thoughts? Is that a realistic ambition?
I mean, the reality is that the technologies already exist to solve these problems. They're just not deployed. And no one's really talking about scrapping gas boilers. What we're talking about is really looking at improving existing systems that are out there. And there's a lot that can be done today to improve, say, controls and upgrades when you're doing maintenance on the system. And it's all about making the systems efficient and running them at lower flow temperatures. So if you get your gas boiler running optimally and lower temperature flow, larger radiators, etc., that will then prepare it for a future upgrade for heat pumps.
Great. And so the products exist, but perhaps, I mean, it might come to you, Joe, the consumer side. Are we seeing the demand? What
I think there's certainly interest, but I think it's very difficult at the moment for consumers to incorporate a lot of new renewable technologies into their homes, and the vast majority of the housing stock is flats to 3-bedroom houses, and I think there's probably a perception that their heat demand is not suitable for renewables. I mean, I think that's probably wrong, that it is suitable for renewables, but the emitter sizes internally would often require changes. So I don't know that it's at the forefront. I think there's a curiosity and an interest, but I don't feel like they're expecting it to affect them anytime soon, unless they're off grid. And I think that there's a much bigger appetite for renewable energies, because oil is, it's vulnerable to price increases. There's big issues around fuel security. So actually renewables present often a cheaper, more stable, much safer form of heating for them.
Yeah, I mean, I live down in Cornwall. It's definitely a place that we don't have the gas in the village that kind of I'm in. There's a lot of solar panels around. It's definitely a big kind of shift in that. What about Steve, from the kind of installer side? Are you seeing a big shift at the moment? Are you seeing real challenges that you could shed some light on?
Not so much a shift in anything. I still think most people are price orientated, which is a bit of a shame, because the infrastructure to change people over to these renewable systems, or even to upgrade their actual, someone just wants a boiler change, but if you turn around and say, look, instead of doing that, let's insulate this or do that, you're doing yourself out of work. But also they're not going to believe you, because all the other installers there are saying, yeah, let's put in this, that, or the other. But I think the shift should be more making what you've got better and making your heat loss less. Less is less regardless of what you've got. And also making whatever you've already got more efficient. And like Rob says, trying to focus on lower temperature and things like weather comp. If you're putting weather comp in, you can actually find out what your system truly is at the moment. So all those things will gear you up more for the future. I think stuff like that, rather than just ripping out what everyone's got and trying to replace it, which we already know that doesn't work. For when the ecosystem started coming in and they were trying to rip out all the older boilers, it didn't really do much. So keeping what you got, making it better, making your house more efficient is the way, in my opinion. Anyway.
Great, thanks, Steve. And let me just bring Colin into the kind of conversation now. Could you kind of share your viewpoint from kind of BEAMA and the regulatory standpoint? Is that the way to go? Is it about bringing in sort of sweeping new things?
I think regulation is a key thing to drive change. I think, with the transition to net zero, you've got to look at it as a progressive attempt to do that. It's not about going out and ripping out loads of boilers. It's really about looking at the end of the lifetime of people's current boilers. What are they going to get next? And that's the key factor, really. We've got 30 years to net zero. In existing homes, if you get a boiler now, it's probably going to last 15 years. So that means at that point, when you change that boiler, you've got to be given a different choice, whether that's a hydrogen-ready boiler or a heat pump or what else. And those are the timescales we're working to. So in a regulatory context, we've got to make sure that we're driving the changes when people are, replacing old boilers, and in new homes as well. I mean, we've effectively lost a year, because we're now being told that the Future Home Standard building regulations are going to be coming out in October, which is the next stage of the consultation for existing homes and the government response to the new homes consultation. They were due to come into force this autumn, so it probably means we're going to be a year down the line before that actually comes into force, just to drive change in new homes. So the regulations are really, really important, but we've got to look at it from the homeowner's perspective. It's about what is the choice that you're going to be given when you come to change your boiler.
Yeah, for sure. It's about that choice, and it's also about probably cost as well. Is that kind of fair to say? You know, so how will customers afford to fit the low carbon heating, you know, alongside all of the other improvements that perhaps we're talking about, you know, with insulation and the like? So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's another element where COVID-19's had an impact, because, you know, there was supposed to be an announcement coming out about financial support for energy efficiency in existing homes. Given all the costs on government, COVID-19 and support for employees and so on, it's very likely that that's going to be downscaled, or, you know, or may not even happen altogether. But if you want to drive change, it's really about regulation or financial incentives.
Joe?
I think that's right. I mean, I think the Future Home Standards is a really important standard. I mean, we are a decade behind, because low carbon homes came in, you know, a decade ago that aimed to put no gas boilers in new builds in 2016, and that was scrapped along with the Code for Sustainable Homes. So I think regulation is a decade behind, and as an industry we haven't really caught up on its behalf, if you like. But I also think it's about performance testing, because if you look at new build homes, there's an alarming statistic that says 1% of new build homes in 2018 were A-rated, had an EPC rating, and the Committee for Climate Change have found that only around half of new homes meet a sort of an not an A-rated standard, but they don't meet the performance standard that they were built to. So the performance testing is a massive element, and the same could be said for heating as well. We're looking at these small increments of getting homeowners perhaps to engage with weather compensation and load compensation, and as Steve fits to those standards. But no one's performance testing those, and it's not, load compensation is not mandatory, and neither is weather comp. So I just think that standards need to be looked at, but we also need to look at how it performs in the field, and how we encourage installers to fit to those standards, and how we encourage consumers to understand those standards, and they can track that over the year. I mean, we have energy meters in our home. Can we not actually track the performance of our boilers? What is the aggregated efficiency of our gas boiler? And then we would have a sort of dual engagement of the consumer and the installer in that process now and for the next 10 years, while we're still just looking at gas boilers.
Yeah, very interesting, Joe. I mean, Rob, from a product perspective, how would you see this being, you know, I guess becoming more affordable overall?
Yeah, I mean, the financing is a big part of it, and an unknown solution right now. But there are things coming together on it. We need to really think about the whole home when we're talking about making the homes efficient and low carbon. And swapping out a gas boiler for a heat pump isn't going to solve it. It needs to be a whole package of measures, including insulation, including new windows, and also including that smart energy system. And actually, what's being developed is a solution called deep retrofit. And that deep retrofit would involve an off-site manufactured kit of parts. So the house would be reclad, all new walls with windows already in them, windows and doors, and a new roof, and a smart energy pod that includes a heat pump, probably a ventilation system, ventilation heat recovery, and an inverter for the solar panels. So by doing that sort of really ambitious and really expensive solution, that is what's going to be needed to get us where we need to get to. And because today we're doing loads of new builds, but the crazy thing with new builds is that we're still building new builds to a low standard that will need retrofit to reach the 2050 standards. So we're still building houses which are not anywhere near good enough. But the new build alone is not going to solve the problem. We need to be doing this deep retrofit program on the 30 odd million existing homes, and we've got 30 years to do it. So we need to get on with it.
I was shocked to see like some of the climate change or the carbon emissions stats from lockdown, actually only went down like 15 or 17% or something overall, despite all of the travel, all the airline industry, all the, manufacturing and stuff must have shut down. So it's made huge amounts coming from our homes, isn't it? That must be
it is from the homes, and it's from the electricity we're using at the homes, all the products that we're buying. There's some really good studies that the CCC have done, Committee on Climate Change, that analyse all this stuff. But as I say, it's not just one thing. It's not just change your boiler. It's change your travel, change your food, everything.
Mm. So what about, Steve, I might come to you next to get your thoughts on what the installers need to do, need to upskill, need to retrain to fit low carbon heating. How can it happen? Who should pay for it?
Well, that's the thing, because anything that's going to be efficient has to be a low temperature. We go as low as we possibly can. Some properties we can't get much lower than 50 degrees or much higher, so we'll end up with that. But still, in my opinion, the 50 degrees is still way off what a heat pump needs. Ideally 30 to 40 for a heat pump, somewhere around there. So you're still way off, even in these newer properties that we're still doing. So that just shows that the property itself isn't ready for that low temperature, which then again points, what's the point in putting a heat pump in if it's not going to be efficient on that property? So it's like everyone keeps saying, it's not one size fits all. And I think gas will be around for a long time. And I think a lot of places need gas, or they need that more sort of varied temp that they can get from it. But if they did start pushing or makes regulations on things like weather comp, load comp, and some accountability to people that aren't fitting these systems properly, that are not doing it, that may push change quicker than just trying to tackle the thing as a whole. Because the way we see it, because we do a lot of rural as well, because there's mountains of different houses, so we do loads of different types of things. So we just can't get one size fits all on them. They're all different. And even if we had one or two houses that were quite similar, the people themselves or the clients themselves don't want something similar. So, it's a huge vary, and getting that sort of knowledge across to installer level is tough, because a lot of boys are stuck in, the S-plan sort of system, whereas, you're talking serious sort of knowledge to get these things through the line, and also in the design aspects. There's a lot of design that is missed on the installer level. A lot of us just go off a picture and hope for the best, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem with that is that there's a very wide margin of error on gas boilers, which is that they still work even when they're fitted inefficiently. So problems down the line might come up years later, but in the immediate year or two after installation, there's not much to tell the consumer that it's been fitted inefficiently, and this goes back to the performance standards and monitoring those. But I think for installers, there's a problem with access to training. There's prevailing wisdom within the industry, which still has a mostly old-fashioned non-condensing boiler sort of system design mentality, and trying to break that is quite difficult. Training is sparse, and I think we're seeing installer labour rates being driven down, not just in real terms, in actual terms. I think installers earn less than they did 12 years ago, probably, when we went into business. So that makes it actually very difficult for installers to take time out from the business, not only to pay for a training course, but also to give up the day rate that they're missing, or day or two, in order to find new products and new ways of working and make those changes to their business. It's very tight, and that has really resulted from a devaluing of gas skills and engineer skills. So there's a real downward spiral, I feel, that needs to be pulled up if we're going to look at the skills gap for installers, and helping them access training that they can start to understand system design better, understand efficiencies better, maximising the system efficiency, not just the boiler. But it's not a tick box paper exercise that 92% efficient on the box, therefore it's 92% efficient in the home, which it really is. So I think there's there needs to be industry-wide help from manufacturers and perhaps from government-funded training that is meaningful training to help fill that gap. And that really lays the foundation for, because if we get low temperature systems right for gas boilers, we get them right for future technologies. And so it's, we're really laying the groundwork then for installing heat pumps and hybrid gas and heat pump systems.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's a kind of a regulatory angle you'd like to just throw in there. It's obviously a pretty complex challenge, given the differences that Steve is talking about from every home that you're going into and client demands. Is that something that you're?
Yeah, I mean, the boiler's got to work correctly, I think, as people have said. And I mean, one of the things that surprised me, because we were having a discussion with government about future standards, and actually in the building regulations, there's no requirement to size the boiler correctly. I mean, I always assumed there was, but there's actually nothing in there to say you've got to size the boiler correctly. And that's a big factor because, for two reasons. I mean, one, houses have changed a lot, but if the tendency is just to replace the existing boiler with one of the same size, and that house has had insulation put in or anything else, then straight away you've got an oversized boiler. The other factor, of course, is that a lot of boilers are combination boilers and they're sized for the hot water load, not for the heating load. And therefore, if you want that boiler to operate efficiently and you want to have load or weather compensating controls that are having a big impact on it, you want to make sure the boiler can modulate down far enough. And these are all aspects that are not necessarily looked at for every boiler that's going in. So we need to make sure that there's a lot more weight given to design for the future as well. And the other factor, I think, is hot water. I think increasingly, particularly for new homes, increasingly for existing homes, hot water is the dominant load. So we need to think very carefully about how we deliver hot water. If you want to do that with renewables in the future, or if you want to use a hot water cylinder as a storage mechanism, potentially for grid flexibility, you can't do that with a combi boiler. So these are big questions that we need to ask just about the systems that are going in.
Okay, thanks, guys. I want to just try and bring in a couple of questions from the panelists now, from the audience as we go to the panelists now. So I might go to Alpesh Kumar. You've asked a question about connected controls. Would you like to ask your question directly to the audience? Feel free to come and ask, or I can ask it for you. You're allowed to talk on the controls here, so feel free to come and ask your question.
Ben, you can take my question, please.
Okay. So Alpesh's question is about connected controls can help in finding inefficient properties by their usage pattern and the temperature profile. So what's the question? The upcoming regulation can push back connected products as mandated to add data-backed SAP and further improvements action mandate properties. So panel, what is your view on this? Rob?
It's a fantastic question. And I'm really glad to say that it's something that government is recognised. And it's actually a work stream that myself and Colin have been working on for the forthcoming new version of SAP 11 in 2025. So we worked together with a whole bunch of different manufacturers to come up with ways that connected technology could harvest this data and then use that data to make good decisions. And both actually help the customer to make better choices, but also for in the background the technology to work out when it's the best times to run and from which fuels. So it's a great question, and you can look forward to seeing some really great technology solutions backed by regulation coming out in the short to medium term. Okay, thanks Rob. And we got a question from Greg Finnegan as well. So this was the panel mentioned energy efficiency. What's their view on FGHR? Anyone like to take that one? Colin, were you?
Well, yeah, I mean, flue gas heat recovery is one of the options on the Boiler Plus amendments that were introduced in 2018. So when you put in a combi boiler in an existing house, it's one of the options alongside weather compensation, load compensation, and smart controls. I mean, I don't have any practical experience of it myself, but it's obviously recognised as an energy-saving technology. I think it's disappointing just on the Boiler Plus side, because you know, they're given these as options really, and you might argue that it should be a bit more driven in terms of making sure the boiler is as efficient as possible. But also in the future home standard consultation, there was no mention of extending those standards to new homes. So it seems a bit bizarre that you've got higher standards for boiler energy efficiency in existing homes than you have in new, but that's an aside.
Nathan also had quite an interesting question. Nathan, would you like to ask yours to the audience, particularly about, you know, the difference between standards in Germany, you know, versus the UK? I think it'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, can you hear me or see me?
Hey, lovely.
You can. Hello, Steve. Yeah, I'd like to. As we all know, there's some wonderful, beautiful people in this industry, especially you know, within the manufacturers. There's lots of manufacturers. Now, when it comes to standards and regulations, there seems to be a lot of influence from manufacturers within their associations. Now, in Germany, they have the VDI system, which is mainly engineers and scientists coming up with good ideas. So if we just look at the heat pump industry, for instance, so a lot of the engineers I've discussed and talked to on my podcast are a bit confused because we have the Heat Pump Association, which is manufacturers. They are part of the Federation of Environmental Trade, which is huge, with full of manufacturers. We've got the Ground Source Heat Pump Association. They do have some engineers, but that's manufacturers, and they're part of the Heat Pump Federation. There's also another one, the Domestic Heat Pump Association, which is part of BISRA, once again, manufacturers. And manufacturers historically always have their sort of own ideas how they want to do things, and they don't like change. I mean, you can go back historically. So when we started putting pumps on the return back in America in the sort of 50s, they hated it when we sort of said, no, pumps now need to be on the flow, because it was part of their package. Pump companies didn't like it. They're very hard to change. So should we have too much influence from manufacturers when it comes to writing standards?
Interesting question. Hey, Rob, would you like to provide a perspective?
I think it's a great point that Nathan makes. Speaking personally, I've engaged deeply with installers over the last sort of 6 or 7 years, on the social forums, and tried to bring in that voice of installers into our development processes, and actually try and get the installers represented on a lot of these government consultations. And I've been encouraging that. For example, last year we brought in BASE to have some discussions face-to-face with the installers. So the installer voice is critical. The installers really are the bridge between the industry and the consumer. So the installers have to know in depth about this, all the different right solutions and how to apply them correctly. So I think certainly, you've got our backing, Nathan, for the voice of the installers, and I would encourage you to work with your professional bodies like SIBSI, SIFI, and the IET. I'm a panel member on the IET, and I can vouch for the IET and how great they are and how engaged they are with government. So please use those groups to get your voice heard.
Okay, thanks, Rob, and thanks, Nathan, for your question there. I might just move on to a couple of other topics that are involved in that big infographic that Rob put together. Hydrogen. We haven't really kind of talked about that, but is that realistic and safe as a solution to replace natural gas? Is that something we see worth exploring?
Still being explored, isn't it? We've got the government are still looking into the feasibility. I mean, I've read a little bit about it. I think the 20% mix into existing gas supplies looks feasible. I think there are field studies at Keele University, and I think they're rolling out some later in the year. I mean, I think as Rob says, and as that infographic says, it's part of the mix. Some people that will be really suitable. I suppose there are sort of technical safety issues around it that need to be addressed within the home. I know that it's prone to leaking, and also the metals can corrode. So there are installation implications. I think they put brazing rather than soldering. So there's lots for installers. There would be some changes, but it does look without too much disruption to be feasible. It's whether 100% hydrogen is really a wholesale direct replacement for gas. And I rather think, I don't know, that just sounds incredibly expensive to me and disruptive. And I rather think, at least in the short term, I know the Committee for Climate Change are looking at hybrid heat pumps and gas boilers. And so they're looking at 10 million deployed over the next 15 years. Maybe that with a hydrogen mix would be a kind of better solution, where you're utilising products that are already in the home and setting up some nice controls, I imagine, with a heat pump outside.
Yeah. General agreement from the panel, Rob? Go on.
The hydrogen piece is very, very interesting, and it's one I was really suspicious of to start with, but I went on some seminars and did some research on it. And the work that's going on with these various technology demonstrations is really, really encouraging. It's looking like initially it's going to be a 20% blend into the natural gas supply. And it looks like existing pipework and boilers are going to be absolutely fine to run on that. For the 100% hydrogen, there's more work needed, and there's some real good work being done with our development teams, with the boiler manufacturers, to develop these boilers. But yeah, it's like a part of a package. There's a new consultation that's going out right now that's open until July, and the government is actually looking at encouraging these biofuels, both biogas that's made from waste food products and from hydrogen that's created and split using electricity. So there's loads of work being done, and the good news from my perspective is that the government's not putting all its eggs in one basket with heat pumps, and it recognises that there's millions and millions of existing heating systems out there that work, that can be improved and developed on.
Just to add to that, there's the heating building strategy is due out later this year from BEAMA, and the idea of that is that it's going to set out, for all of these technologies, the role that they think they can play, and therefore that should give a much better idea and focus for industry as a whole to know how much they think hydrogen can contribute, how much they think electrification can contribute, and so on. So I think once we see that, we'll be in a much better position to really understand where things are going.
And I want to go back to Steve as well. I know you've got a bit of a passion around sort of direct electric and batteries and things like that. Is that also something that we need to be perhaps putting more of a focus on?
Yeah, well, I would have thought anything sort of new build, because any of these now Octopus Energy and all those things that are load switching and things like that, if you've got batteries on a domestic point inside your house and stuff like that, there's people like Ken Bone and Rich that are doing them quite regularly, and you're load shifting in relation to that. The beauty of it is when the grid is oversaturated with this renewable energy, it's renewable energy using anyway, so you're just using it to charge your battery. And then from there, whether you're going to use it on a heat pump to get the coefficient on it, or whether you're just going to use it direct onto your system, it's entirely up to you. But if you're going direct electric, and electric's that cheap, or even sometimes you're getting paid to charge your battery, sometimes you could, almost do away with the wet system and that side completely, and just have a hot water tank and direct underfloor heating or whatever you want. But I would have thought that is more viable on new builds rather than retrofitting, in my opinion, anyway.
So really good point, Steve. And looking at the future plans for the 2025 regs and beyond, the actual heat loss that's been planned for new builds is so low that it's going to move towards a very, very low kilowatt output required on the homes, and certainly an electrified system, or even a system a bit like they have in the States with the centralized ventilation and heating system, going back to the old school really, is on the table again. So that there's nothing that's out of question at the moment. 2025 seems a long way away, but it's going to be here soon. So we do need to keep our eyes open and our minds open, really.
Yeah, I think, and if you were looking at only air source heat pump, that's why I think it's nice that other things are getting explored. If the government's only looking at air source heat pumps, it's so easy to mess them up. And if designs aren't done absolutely perfect, heat loss perfect, everything is dead on, you know, these are going to cost a fortune to run. And things like direct electric, you know, you can still mask things and also bring stuff down a lot easier without having to risk the flaws in the design like air source heat pump does.
Well, the electric heat, as you say, tied in with a smart grid and an EV with your electric car, that opens up a whole new set of possibilities. And that whole smart electric, smart energy piece is something that is being looked at and ties in with all this work for 2025 on the connected controls. Because you can imagine a future where you'll come home, plug your electric car in, and run your home off of that, and then it gets charged up overnight when the electricity is free or very cheap.
Guys, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so if there's any more questions, please type them away. I might just ask each of our panelists to kind of share a final closing thought with you, something to take away, and kind of wrap this up. But it's been a fascinating debate. Thanks, guys, for your participation as well. Is there anything, what would be your kind of one message anyone would like to share for the audience to think about?
I think, since we're talking to installers mostly, that I think that I would suggest that they can find really good selling points and a good strong sales pitch from promoting low temperature gas systems, even if it's still just gas boilers at this stage, and probably exploring on the side some of the hybrid products that are already available that the manufacturers will be offering training on, and perhaps looking at heat pumps as well. And I think if they are nervous about the future, just understanding system design and getting condensing boilers to condense, and then starting to look at the other technologies that are probably going to come in, hybrids and heat pumps, then I think they can start to gear themselves up for a future in which they can play a really valuable role in, and hopefully in having a great sales pitch around efficiency, which consumers are increasingly open to. And you know, they want to know that they're doing their bit for the environment when they put a new boiler in, that it's not just a paper efficiency on paper. Then I think they can start to win work, and hopefully, as Steve does very successfully, you know, charge probably better day rates than many are experiencing in the market right now.
Thanks, Jay. Rob, Colin, Steve. Rob, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a case of keeping up to date, really. There's a lot of improvements that can be done with existing systems. A lot of times the system isn't sized and balanced right. And, you know, the optimal solution for the existing system that you've got isn't in place. But certainly, you know, get trained up on heat pumps. I did a heat pump training course the other day online, and it was really, really interesting and surprising actually how the skill set of a gas installer and heating engineer will transfer to heat pumps. And just, you know, keep following us guys on Twitter, really. We have some great discussions and share a lot of the knowledge and heads up on these consultations as they come through. So this stuff's not going to get solved overnight, and we all need to be a part of it.
Great, thanks Rob. And then Steve, would you like to?
Yeah, for on an installer point of view, I would say take baby steps. If you're coming from an S-plan sort of system, high temperature, no load compensation or anything like that, just take, you know, once a week, learn something new, learn some load compensation, then next week start learning about weather compensation, and then it's a gradual sort of progression to, you know, full-on air source heat pumps at 30 degrees with different delta T's across it and all that. So just don't try and saturate your brain with it straight away. Just take some little steps ahead towards it, and get on things like Twitter or Instagram and ask all the questions, because especially on Twitter, I've learned so much on it. There's so many people on there that are good, and everyone's decent, and everyone's wanting to learn off each other. So I'd just go down that route. A few little lessons each week, and then slowly head towards the as low as you possibly can with an air source. Once you crack a low temperature air source at 30 degrees, you've got the design in the pocket. Then it's all easy from there.
Great, thanks, Steve. And Colin, kind of final word.
I suppose just to echo what other people have said. I mean, you know, there is change coming. I mean, there could be massive change in you know, the heating systems we put in the next 10, 15 years. But before then, there's plenty of opportunities to make systems more efficient and better for the users.
Great. I just want to thank everyone, thank the panelists for their time, for their thoughts, for their engagement here. You guys in the audience for your questions as well. So we probably haven't had time to cover all of them, but we'll try and perhaps clear some of them up afterwards as well. Nathan, thanks for a suggestion as well. There is a podcast I think Joe and Steve are appearing on. Is it the low carbon podcast called Beta Talk? So do feel free to follow them on that. Like Steve and Rob says, you can follow Honeywell and use Twitter and things as well, just to kind of expand your knowledge in this area and taking those baby steps. And that's it. So thanks very much, guys. Thanks for your engagement, and hopefully see you on some of the next panels and conversations soon. Perhaps in person. Perhaps we'll still be doing these virtually.
That's great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Au revoir.
Bye bye.
All the best.
Bye bye.